unlimited burgundy, mozzarella cheese on top of the best pizza in the town, and a private performance by the Mansudae art troupe. Tell me, is there a reason why you wouldn't want to climb the North Korean power ladder? While average citizens chew tree bark for fibre, you could be sipping Chateau Picard, shopping for Swiss cheese at the imported goods store, and wearing real fur to give opinions about agricultural reform. The question is how? How can you become a powerful politician in the kingdom when you weren't born on a sacred mountain and your last name isn't Kim? In the People's Republic's Game of Thrones, that's a bit like trying to win a rigged lottery. But don't worry too much, we are here to help. This episode is a practical guide to navigating Pyongyang's corridors of power for you. We'll walk you through the do's and don'ts by following the real-life example of Choe Son-hui, the trailblazing female diplomat who rose from an interpreter to the foreign minister. Why Choe Son-hui, you asked? She's not a daughter of the supreme leader. She's not even a bloodline insider. But today, she is the second most powerful woman in North Korea and the first female foreign minister in the regime's history, one of the only women in the Politburo, and perhaps the most disciplined survivor of all. So, her rise is not just exceptional, it's instructional. This is not just her story, this is your guide. To survive, you'll need to be as cunning as a fox and as pliant as a reed, radiating loyalty at all times. But if you play the long game right, you might just win it all. Buckle up, let's begin.
As our General Kim Jong-un has mentioned very clearly last year, that DPRK is not going to proliferate or sell out our nuclear weapons to other countries. That the mission of our nuclear weapons is only for deterring the possible U.S. attack on DPRK. Thank you.
In North Korea, the first and most important step happens before you're even born. Choose your parents wisely. To stand a chance, you'll need an impeccable revolutionary pedigree, or at least an adoptive family with deep roots in the ruling circle. Choe Son-hui won this lottery of birth. Born in 1964, she was, though allegedly by adoption, the daughter of Chae Yong-rim, a powerful party elder. Through her stepfather's close connection to the ruling Kim dynasty, doors would open for her that remain firmly shut for ordinary folks. In other words, step one is half the battle. Without heavyweight family ties, your path to power is likely doomed from the start. Choe's upbringing reflects her privileged status. She had access to the best education North Korea could offer by attending Pyongyang's top school for cadres children, rubbing shoulders with the offspring of generals and ministers. By age 12, while most North Korean kids were chanting slogans in unison, young Choe was whisked abroad to learn foreign languages. Yes, the future diplomat studied Chinese and English overseas as a pre-teen, a highly unusual opportunity in the 1970s. This kind of early grooming was a clear signal. She was being prepped for a diplomatic career from the get-go. If you're not born into the ruling Kim bloodline, being born into an old revolutionary family is the next best thing. It confers a golden shield of trustworthiness by association, and often a coveted spot in Pyongyang's elite schools. To put it bluntly, in North Korea, nepotism isn't a vice, it's the system. The leadership assumes that loyalty is hereditary, passed down in revolutionary bloodlines. Anyhow, you would be unlikely to speak against your privileges when you grow up with them. Choe Son-hui's case exemplifies this. Her stepfather's stature gave her a head start that no amount of individual brilliance alone could match. Had she been born to a less distinguished family, she might be toiling in obscurity, no matter her talents. Another example would be Pak Pong-ju, who served as the Premier of North Korea for 9 years. He didn't share DNA with any supreme leader, but his dad was a revolutionary comrade of Kim Il-sung. So, if you're mapping your own route to power, first ask yourself, are mum or dad in the dictator's inner circle? If not, don't give up. Keep watching this video as a satire, because for most North Koreans, merit without pedigree will only get you so far. Bloodline is destiny in Pyongyang.
For the first time, newly minted 4-star General Kim Jong-un joined his frail-looking father at a major public event.
All right, let's assume you cleared step 1. The next is to cultivate rare skills that set you apart, yet do so under the party's benevolent eye. In a regime obsessed with perceived threats, technical expertise can be your stealth weapon, as long as it's deployed in the service of the state. To avoid being a potential threat, you better be a technocrat who never challenged the decision of the Kims. You should have no glamour, no rumours, no fanfare, just pure function. For Choe Son-hui, her weapon of choice was language and diplomacy. With her elite background, she gained access to something almost unheard of for average citizens: extended education overseas and the mastery of language skills. As we mentioned, Choe got educated in China at a young age. Then, she went on studying in Austria and Malta during her formative years. For context, Austria and the DPRK established diplomatic relations in 1974. Austria has been considered a neutral European state. Because of that, Vienna acts as a diplomatic crossroads, where states can engage in international diplomacy that's somewhat insulated from direct pressure. Imagine the culture shock of a North Korean teenager strolling the streets of Vienna or Valletta. Choe was there on a mission. The state was investing in her, crafting a polyglot diplomat who could maneuver in Western corridors of power. By her early 20s, Choe was fluent in English and deeply knowledgeable about the outside world. In North Korea, that made her a prized asset. Here is your takeaway. Leverage any chance to acquire critical skills, especially if you have the opportunity to study abroad. Also, always remember who's footing the bill. You'll owe every success to the leader's generosity. Why is foreign education so critical? Because the regime needs trusted insiders who can speak to the enemies. North Korea's ruling family may rule by fear at home, but they crave savvy emissaries to handle foes and negotiations abroad. A non-Kim like you doesn't dream about supreme leadership, but you can become indispensable as a technocrat or diplomat, like actually negotiating the nuclear program or translating denuclearization jargon. Choe understood this perfectly. By studying international relations and languages, she positioned herself as one of the very few North Koreans who could confidently engage Americans on their own linguistic turf. It was a calculated gamble by Pyongyang's elders. Send a loyal daughter of the revolution out into the world, have her soak up knowledge, and hope she doesn't get seduced by decadent ideas. Choe delivered on that gamble, returning home armed with fluent English and a deep understanding of Western diplomacy, with no visible ideological contamination. As a rising power player, you must walk a tightrope. Show your expertise, but never your ego. North Korea's hierarchy won't tolerate a young upstart acting worldly or questioning Juche ideology just because they've seen Vienna's cafes. Choe seems to have grasped this. Despite her cosmopolitan training, she maintained the image of a humble servant of the state, devoted to the great leader's vision.
We're not expecting anything from our side. We just do whatever we should do, and what we are doing is to try to cope with the current situation where the United States is trying to threaten DPRK with nuclear weapons.
She applied her education exactly where the party wanted, translating and negotiating in the service of the regime's interests. In summary, Step 2 is to acquire standout skills under regime sponsorship. Become the indispensable expert in a critical area: rocket science, cyber force, foreign languages, you name it. Make yourself useful to the leadership. Choe Son-hui became the English-speaking, American-understanding wunderkind of the Foreign Ministry, a walking, talking conduit to Washington. That unique value would be her ladder upward. Just be cautious. Being too smart or too well-educated can arouse jealousy or suspicion in the old guard. You must hide the tiger's claws under velvet. Impress the boss with your knowledge, but never imply you know more than him. In Pyongyang, intelligence is admired only if it's coupled with absolute deference. Armed with your fancy education, how do you actually break into the power structure? North Korea's top jobs aren't posted on LinkedIn, and ambitious resumes don't get you far without patronage. The key is to enter the arena through a low-profile, high-utility role. Something that lets you linger in the background of important events, soaking up knowledge and trust, without challenging anyone's prominence. The classic path? Becoming an interpreter, a secretary, or an aide to senior leaders. It's exactly how Choe Son-hui launched her career in the late 1980s. Choe joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1988, not as a high-flying envoy, but as a junior researcher and English interpreter. She effectively became the right-hand language assistant to veteran negotiator Kim Gye-gwan, North Korea's first vice foreign minister, who was in charge of nuclear talks at the time.
I think we'll have some bilaterals and probably talk to North Koreans and a number of the other countries. And it's a beautiful day today, so let's see what we can do at the talks. So thank you very much.
Picture the scene. Long, grueling negotiations over North Korea's nuclear program in the 1990s. On one side, American diplomats with coffee-fueled stamina. On the other side, grizzled North Korean negotiators. And just behind them, a young woman quietly whispering translations into their ears. As an interpreter at the six-party talks and other high-level dialogues, Choe was invisible to the cameras, but invaluable to her superiors. It is a brilliant way to rise. You gain exposure to critical state secrets and decision-making, yet you're perceived as a tool rather than a rival. Choe spent years dutifully translating and shuttling documents, a fly on the wall of history. She was present at nearly every major nuclear negotiation from the 1990s through the 2000s, including the agreed framework talks to curb Pyongyang's atomic ambitions. By the 2000s, Choe was North Korea's chief interpreter in the international negotiations, an indication of how trusted and experienced she had become. Choe eventually came to be known as the North Korean who knows America best. That's a valuable title in a regime that views the US as its chief adversary. And internally, she proved her loyalty and discretion time and again. After all, an interpreter must be trusted not to divulge what she hears behind closed doors. Choe excelled at the art of being present, but not intrusive. For your own journey, Step 3 means swallowing your pride and embracing a supporting role. Be the grey eminence behind an important figure. Maybe you become the military aide who handles a top general's paperwork, or the economic analyst drafting reports for a senior minister. Visibility to the leader, but invisibility to blame. That's the balance. Choe's early career as an interpreter insulated her from the brutal accountability that higher-ranking negotiators faced when talks went south. If a summit failed, the negotiator-in-chief might get sacked or worse, but the interpreter? She lives to translate another day. Meanwhile, she was accumulating a treasure trove of experience and connections. Choe's big break as a junior came in August 2009, when former US President Bill Clinton traveled to Pyongyang to negotiate the release of 2 American journalists. Who sat by Clinton's side, translating every word for Kim Jong-il? Choe Son-hui. She also interpreted for Jimmy Carter during a similar humanitarian visit in 2010. Each of these episodes put her in direct contact with the highest levels of her own government and with VIP foreigners. For a North Korean official, that is the ultimate test of trust, being allowed in the same room as a Kim and an American ex-president. Choe passed with flying colours. She even reportedly translated for the young Kim Jong-un when Dennis Rodman paid his bizarre basketball visits in 2013, though rumour has it she wasn't thrilled about babysitting the tattooed NBA star and expressed rare dissent about that circus. Anyhow, the Swiss-schooled NBA superfan, our supreme leader Kim Jong-un, speaks fluent English, good enough to talk to Dennis himself. The lesson here is that power in North Korea must be approached obliquely. Choe made herself useful, irreplaceable even, while maintaining a deferential profile. You must do the same. Be patient. Years, even decades of loyal service in the wings might be necessary before you get a spotlight. In Pyongyang, sudden meteoric rises are typically reserved for family members or propagandistic shows. Everyone else climbs one cautious rung at a time. Remember the proverb, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down.
Now, North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister, who deals with nuclear weapons issues and negotiations with the United States, arrived in Beijing on Thursday on a two-nation trip that will also take her to Russia.
After decades in the shadows, you might finally get a chance to step into the spotlight. When that moment comes, you must seize it carefully. Choe Son-hui's moment arrived in the mid-2000s. The Foreign Ministry promoted her to head the North America Department, making her the point person for US affairs, while she simultaneously led the Institute for American Studies. In other words, she was writing North Korea's playbook for dealing with Washington. Her credentials were so solid that even foreign counterparts came to respect her as a shrewd strategist. But crucially, even as she climbed into higher positions, Choe maintained an ultra-modest public persona. This woman, on the cusp of real influence, still dressed in what you'd call high-ranking drab, plain, dark suits that could blend into a lineup of minor cadres. She wore the little red lapel pin over her heart at all times, a tiny badge that screams loyalty. I worship the Kims, front and centre. Choe carried herself with the humble posture of a dutiful servant, shoulders slightly bowed, hands clasped, never speaking out of turn or hogging the limelight. In short, she looked and acted the part of the reliable, unthreatening technocrat. This strategy paid off when North Korea shifted to diplomacy. In 2018, Kim Jong-un pivoted from missile tests to summit meetings, and Choe was catapulted into frontline negotiations. She became Vice Foreign Minister, effectively Kim's de facto advisor on dealing with the West. Suddenly, the woman who had spent years whispering translations was now whispering advice into the leader's ear. And she still played it cool. Throughout the whirlwind of 2018, Choe was often seen hovering just behind Kim at major events, quietly essential, yet never upstaging the supreme leader. Consider the Singapore summit of June 2018, the first ever meeting between a North Korean leader and a sitting US president. Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump were the stars, of course, but keen observers noticed that the middle-aged woman hovering at Kim's elbow throughout the event.
North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Choe Son-hui said today that she will suggest to leader Kim Jong-un that he reconsider meeting with President Trump if the U.S. continues what she called its unlawful and outrageous acts. Choe handles U.S. affairs at the North's Foreign Ministry, and she responded in particular to recent comments by Vice President Mike Pence.
That was Choe, dutifully in the background. It was her team that spent weeks beforehand hashing out agenda items and crafting the leaders' joint statement in the DMZ and even in New York. And it was Choe who, in the run-up to the summit, lobbed an artfully outrageous insult at US Vice President Mike Pence, calling him a political dummy after Pence threatened North Korea ahead of the talks. Was this an unsanctioned outburst by Choe? Absolutely not. Those harsh words were almost certainly cleared from the top. Choe was acting as the leader's loyal attack dog, testing just how badly Trump wanted the meeting. In fact, her fiery comments so infuriated the White House that Trump briefly cancelled the summit. She promptly faded out of sight, while Pyongyang waited to see if Trump would come back to the table. When the summit was miraculously rescheduled a week later, there was Choe again, prim and proper in the background, as if nothing had happened. It was a masterclass in knowing when to breathe fire on command and when to retreat into polite silence. On June 12, 2018, as Kim and Trump finally shook hands in front of cameras in Singapore, Choe Son-hui stood just off to the side, watchful and poised. She had no speaking role in the photo ops, but don't be fooled, she literally crafted what they signed. In fact, after the summit, she even addressed reporters to emphasize that Pyongyang was willing to improve relations if the US showed mutual respect. Imagine that, a high-ranking North Korean woman coolly fielding questions from foreign media in English. In North Korean terms, that's like walking a tightrope over a pit of sharks. One slip of the tongue and she could be accused of ideological deviance or speaking without authorization. But Choe delivered only regime-sanctioned lines, nothing more. She projected confidence without personal grandstanding. Her stature grew further during the Hanoi summit in February 2019. That meeting between Kim and Trump ended abruptly, without a deal, a potential disaster for all involved. As tensions and confusion mounted, Choe again stepped into a risky role. At an impromptu midnight press conference after the summit's collapse, it was Choe Son-hui who took the mic. She calmly announced that Kim Jong-un might have lost the will to negotiate after the US refusal to offer even a partial lifting of sanctions. In other words, she spun the failure to make it look like Washington's fault. The mere fact that Choe was the one delivering this message hinted at her standing. She did so flawlessly, striking a tone of measured disappointment without ever questioning Kim's authority. Here is your takeaway. Choe Son-hui's rise from anonymous translator to international power broker is practically unheard of in North Korea. How did she do it? By being strategic at every step, mastering skills the regime needed, proving her loyalty over and over, and carefully navigating the minefield of Pyongyang's politics. If you're not a Kim, that's the only way to climb the ladder. And even then, as we'll see, your position is never secure.
미국과의 힘의 균형을 맞추는 것이 우리 최종 목표입니다. 거의 마지막 단계에 왔다는 것으로 저는 알고 있습니다. ICBM을 비롯한 여러 가지 로켓 발사들은 우리
All roads in North Korea lead to one destination, the Supreme Leader's favor. No matter how hard you work or how high you climb, your fate ultimately hinges on what he thinks of you. The rarest currency in Pyongyang is trust from the Kim family. Choe Son-hui earned that in spades, and it was perhaps the single biggest factor in her ascension. With high-profile diplomacy comes high-profile risk. The Hanoi summit was a fiasco, ended up with no deals. So, a lesser figure might have become the convenient scapegoat for the failure. In the aftermath, some South Korean press speculated that Choe and others would be purged for the failure. And sure enough, a few months later in summer 2019, Choe vanished from public view. Seoul's intelligence rumour mill whispered that she had been sent to a labour camp for re-education, supposedly because of a spat with her direct boss, Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho, during the Hanoi fallout. It appears she got a brief taste of the very fate she had so carefully dodged for years. But remarkably, by late 2019, Choe was back in the saddle, as poised and undeterred as ever. Whatever punishment or benching she endured was temporary. Why did she survive when others didn't? Likely because of the same factors behind her rise. She was too useful to get rid of, and she knew how to humble herself when needed. Insiders noted that at the summit stage, Choe always made sure to frame outcomes as the leader's victory or the enemy's folly, never her own failure. After Hanoi, for instance, she didn't apologise. She reinforced that Kim had offered a realistic deal and the US blew it. That positioning protected Kim's image and face. She was irreplaceable in 2019, and the regime knew it. All this set the stage for Choe's final ascent. In April 2019, barely 2 months after the Hanoi debacle, Choe Son-hui was promoted, not punished, becoming first vice foreign minister, and even appointed to the State Affairs Commission, the country's top governing council. It was an unprecedented elevation for a non-Kim woman. The summit failed, but Comrade Choe did her duty well. Thus, she was rewarded. She had solved big problems, and crucially, she let the credit flow upward to Kim. That formula saved her. In private, Kim Jong-un surely knew how instrumental Choe was. In public, she remained the modest servant, attributing every success to the leader's genius. Choe had something priceless in Pyongyang, the supreme leader's trust. She now had Kim's ear and could speak to him freely about negotiation strategy. That is the ultimate prize for a technocrat, becoming part of the supreme leader's inner circle. Once you have that, you're no longer just a faceless cog. You're part of the engine. This trust was ultimately formalized when Choe was appointed to the State Affairs Commission, SAC. The SAC is essentially North Korea's top governing council, chaired by none other than the Kim himself. Being a member signaled she was in the inner policy circle. She was only the second woman ever on the SAC. Well, the first one was Kim's own aunt decades ago. This was an astounding elevation for someone not of the Paek-2 bloodline. It underscored that Kim Jong-un personally endorsed her standing. He wouldn't put someone he doubted onto that body. Now here's the caution. Trust can be a double-edged sword. It raises you high, but if broken, the fall is fatal. Choe has had to navigate keeping Kim's trust, even when others might seek to undermine her. One episode stands as a stark reminder. In 2020, reports surfaced that Choe Son-hui was abruptly sent for revolutionary re-education, essentially punished, after a dispute with her superior, Foreign Minister Ri Son-gwon. What happened? According to intelligence leaks, Choe and Ri had a heated argument over policy, and she perhaps overstepped in the eyes of some. She was packed off to a remote farm for 3 months of hard labour and ideological study as penance. For someone of Choe's stature, this was a grave humiliation, but crucially, it was not the end of her story. She wasn't executed or permanently banished. This sort of thing happens in North Korea's elite circles more often than gets reported. It's a way to discipline officials without permanently removing them. Crucially, after the re-education, Choe was reinstated to her position. That indicates Kim Jong-un allowed her to be punished just enough to remind everyone who's boss, but not so much as to remove her. He still valued her, but perhaps needed her to know her place. Surviving that purge also required behind-the-scenes allies. Choe, being well connected, surely had patrons arguing on her behalf. Perhaps other seasoned diplomats, or even elements of the military who respected her work, piped up to Kim that she was too useful to lose. Some surmise this re-education was orchestrated by rivals, most likely Kim Yo-jong, to knock Choe down a peg. Indeed, that same year, Kim Yo-jong was on the rise and likely didn't want anyone, especially a strong-willed woman outside the family, to get too influential.
North Korea and Russia are looking to strengthen their ties during North Korean Foreign Minister Choe Son-hui's visit to Moscow. They have discussed enhancing bilateral relations in all areas, including sensitive areas, according to Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov on Wednesday. No specific details were given regarding the sensitive areas, but they seem to involve military cooperation.
But the fact that Choe bounced back shows she managed to regain Kim's confidence quickly. Perhaps she offered a sincere self-criticism and doubled down on proving loyalty. She kept her head down after returning, causing no waves, and continued working diligently. The next year, 2021, Kim Jong-un reshuffled top diplomats in a way that seemed to favor hardliners. Choe lost her SAC seat in that shuffle. And guess who was appointed to the SAC at the same meeting? Kim Yo-jong. The optics were clear. Choe was out, the leader's sister was in. Outside analysts called it a comprehensive victory for Kim Yo-jong in an internal power struggle. It seems that, despite Choe's return to grace after the farm labor, the Kim family had decided to tighten its grip. Yet, in 2022, Choe was promoted as the foreign minister of North Korea, the first woman ever to hold the post, and one of the very few officials outside the Kim family to reach such a height. The regime even announced her promotion publicly in state media, an unusual splash of spotlight that suggested Kim Jong-un was proud to show off a capable female diplomat. Of course, every North Korean news article dutifully emphasized that Choe faithfully carried out General Kim's diplomatic strategy. But between the lines, it was evident that Choe had become a vital player in North Korean foreign affairs. We may say that, finally, Kim Jong-un's trust in her ability and loyalty endured these bumps.
베이징에 도착하셨습니다. 조선노동당 총비서이시며 조선민주주의인민공화국 국무위원장이신 경애하는 김정은 동지께서 9월 2일 오후 중국인민 항일 전쟁 및 세계 반파쇼 전쟁 승리
Looking in retrospect, how did Choe cultivate such trust? Absolute candor in private, absolute obedience in public. A leader like Kim doesn't need sycophants. He needs a few lieutenants who can tell him the truth discreetly. Choe likely mastered the art of briefing Kim honestly on what the Americans were thinking, what could or couldn't be gotten in a deal, etc., without ever challenging his authority. She frames advice as options for Kim to consider, not her own opinion. This gives Kim the decision-making power while informing him of realities. Another factor, personal loyalty gestures. North Korean officials routinely heap effusive praise on the leader in written essays or speeches. Choe is no exception. When addressing anything domestic, she parrots the Kim cult rhetoric as fervently as required. If Kim issues a new ideological line, she's front and center supporting it. Essentially, she proved that despite her international savvy, she's a true believer of the Juche ideology. Kim Jong-un likely appreciated that someone so worldly still appeared ideologically pure. It validates his narrative that even cosmopolitan elites remain devout followers of his dynasty. But always remember your ceiling. No matter how trusted you are, you will never be Kim's equal or successor. He might consult her, rely on her skills, even protect her to an extent. But she, like everyone, is expendable the moment she poses a threat or outlives her usefulness. A chilling example of broken trust is the fate of Jang Song-taek, Kim's own uncle by marriage, who was once the second most powerful man in the country. Kim Jong-un initially trusted Jang as a mentor, then famously turned on him and had him executed as a traitor, worse than a dog. If a Kim relative can fall from grace that hard, imagine a non-family member. Choe's head will always remain on the chopping block. During the hardship, you must remember, endurance is everything. If you find yourself on the wrong end of a purge, your goal is to live through it and return to favor. Swallow your pride whole. Publicly abase yourself if you must. Perform loyalty even more fervently to show you've learned your lesson. When you come back, be low-key. Let some time pass before you attempt any bold moves. In North Korea, comebacks do happen. But comebacks only happen for those who never openly rebel and who still have something to offer. Finally, have a support network. Choe's family ties likely protected her to a degree. The old guard in the party might have seen her as one of ours and spoke up for her. If you lack the last name Kim, you'd better have other connections, mentors, patrons, a faction that considers you valuable. Just be careful. Aligning with the wrong faction can be fatal if that faction falls out of favor. Choe seems to have aligned her loyalty singularly with Kim Jong-un himself, not any lesser cliques. In sum, to survive the deadly game, be adaptable, be contrite when needed, and be persistently useful. Choe's scars from labor camp remind her and us that every rise in North Korea contains the seeds of a potential fall. The trick is making sure the fall isn't permanent.
North Korea, the country's state news agency, is now reporting that Jang Song-taek, he is the uncle of the leader Kim Jong-un, has been executed. Now, this is a surprise move because until recently, Jang was considered North Korea's second most powerful man. We knew that there was problems in the air, certainly. Earlier this week, images emerged of Jang.
You've navigated the minefields of merit and modesty, survived the purges, and earned the leader's trust. Now comes the ultimate test for any non-Kim who rises too high, confronting the reality that you will always be second place to the Kim bloodline. In particular, if you're a woman of power, you'll inevitably be measured against the regime's reigning female royal, currently Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's little sister. Think of her as the final boss in this metaphorical game. You don't fight her, but you must survive her, maneuver around her, perhaps even quietly cooperate with her, all while knowing that if push comes to shove, blood beats talent every time. Choe Son-hui's rise coincided with Kim Yo-jong's. They are the two most prominent women in North Korean politics today, but their situations could not be more different. Choe is a self-made official who earned her clout through hard work and outstanding abilities. Kim Yo-jong is royalty, born of Paektu blood, inherently untouchable, groomed from the cradle to bolster her brother's rule. She doesn't need technical expertise or decades of service to wield power. She has it by virtue of her surname. As such, Kim Yo-jong serves as a living reminder to Choe that no matter how accomplished you are, you remain a commoner next to a Kim dynasty princess. Evidence of a subtle rivalry, or at least some tension between Choe and Kim Yo-jong, has surfaced in various ways. We saw how in 2021, Kim Yo-jong effectively replaced Choe on the SAC, a move widely read as Kim Yo-jong asserting her dominance in state affairs. According to some defector testimonies and intel whispers, Kim Yo-jong was uneasy with Choe's growing profile and strong personality. It's said that Kim Yo-jong perceived Choe's extensive dealings with Americans and perhaps her direct rapport with Kim Jong-un as a potential threat or nuisance. After all, Kim Yo-jong herself has taken an active role in foreign policy. Here is a natural friction: the career diplomat versus the anointed propagandist. One account suggested Kim Yo-jong even questioned Choe's ideological purity, implying Choe was too pro-US in outlook. Whether that's true or just palace intrigue, it shows how easily a non-Kim's strengths can be reframed as weaknesses by a Kim.
North Korea's supreme leader has promoted his younger sister to the country's political bureau. Kim Yo-jong is one of former leader Kim Jong-il's 7 children. She and current leader Kim Jong-un have the same mother, Ko Young-hee. She's the only one of Kim Jong-un's siblings involved in government. The younger Kim can be seen in glimpses on various North Korean news and propaganda videos. She's had a leading...
Choe's 2020 farm exile had Kim Yo-jong's fingerprints on it. It was, in this interpretation, Kim Yo-jong's way of flexing, demonstrating that she could sideline even a star official like Choe if she wanted. If that was the message, Choe certainly received it loud and clear. The fact that she returned from that ordeal suggests she managed to appease Kim Yo-jong. Perhaps Choe humbled herself before the princess behind closed doors, or agreed to yield certain turf. In practical terms, how does one deal with the first sister as a non-family elite? Very carefully. Kim Yo-jong is often described by observers as iron-fisted and temperamental. She's the one who publicly called the South Korean president a parrot raised by America and referred to defectors as human scum in state media. She doesn't mince words. Internally, she likely has her brother's ear every day. She can whisper suspicions about anyone. If you're Choe, you must ensure Kim Yo-jong sees you as useful and loyal, not a competitor. That might involve flattering her behind the scenes, deferring to her on certain policy pronouncements, or even seeking her endorsement on major decisions. Essentially, Choe has to treat Kim Yo-jong almost like an additional boss, one with an unpredictable temper and no formal office that constrains her. There's also symbolic politics at play. When North Korea's delegation attended summits, Kim Yo-jong sometimes acted as her brother's personal aide, while Choe was there as a policy aide. Photographers captured moments where Kim Yo-jong hovered close to Kim Jong-un, always in the camera frame, whereas Choe stood a step back. Hierarchy made visual.
The unexpected appearance of Kim's daughter, Kim Joo-ae, has drawn great attention. She was seen standing directly behind her father during the welcoming ceremony, receiving treatment akin to North Korea's number 2.
In one recent example, during Kim Jong-un's 2025 visit to China, his 12-year-old daughter Kim Joo-ae was brought along, and state media showed the girl standing ahead of Foreign Minister Choe Son-hui during the welcome ceremony. Think about that. A pre-teen literally given precedence over the seasoned diplomat. The message could not be clearer. The Kim family, no matter how young or inexperienced, outranks the most veteran non-Kim official. It's absurd, it's feudal, and it's the reality Choe must live with. Bloodline is the ultimate card. Choe might be the highest-ranking female official, but Kim Yo-jong is the most powerful woman by virtue of lineage. That's a nuanced but important distinction. Choe holds offices and titles. Kim Yo-jong holds pure power. So how do you survive under that shadow? Deference, diplomacy, and boundaries. Defer to the princess on matters she's sensitive about. If Kim Yo-jong issues a fiery statement condemning the US one day, Choe's foreign ministry should not issue a more moderate one the next that could be seen as contradicting her, even if diplomatically that might smooth things over. Choe likely coordinates to avoid upstaging any Kim family statements. Diplomacy applies internally too. Choe must use all her negotiation skills, not just with Americans, but within her own court. That could mean quietly negotiating compromises with Kim Yo-jong on policy differences, or appealing to mutual interests. And finally, set boundaries. It means to accept some battles you can't win. If Kim Yo-jong wants credit for something, let her have it. If another Kim stakes a claim over certain policy domains, you might strategically step back from those and focus on what is allowed to be handled. It's a delicate dance of not provoking jealousy. North Korean history is rife with perceived challenges eliminated due to the Kim family's envy or fear. One could speculate that even respected figures like General Ri Jong-il or others were removed because they got too popular. Choe, and you must ensure the stars on the shoulders never outshine the Kims in the domestic narrative. Perhaps the most skillful thing Choe has done is to frame herself not as a rival to Kim Yo-jong, but as a complement. She is the diplomat, Kim Yo-jong is the propagandist. Different roles, both serving Kim Jong-un. That is key to pacifying the princess. All this might sound like diminishing yourself, and it is, but in North Korea, self-diminishment is often the price of survival at the top. Choe's navigation of Kim Yo-jong is perhaps the ultimate example of how a smart non-Kim prolongs their career. In North Korea, loyalty is heavier than a mountain. Suspicion is sharper than a blade. If the royal family suspects your intentions, no track record will save you. So if you ever reach the lofty heights Choe did, remember there's one more boss above all, the Kim clan itself. Play by their rules or you will be removed from the game. The final boss fight in this game isn't one you win, it's one you survive by showing you were never trying to fight at all. Congratulations! If you've followed these steps, you might just find yourself in a position few ever attain. A powerful figure in North Korea without technically having royal blood. Perhaps you've become foreign minister like Choe Son-hui, or a top general, or a chief technocrat. You'll have an impressive title, a gated house in Pyongyang, maybe even occasional smiles and handshakes from the supreme leader. You've played the long game and won. Sort of. Why sort of? Because now you inhabit a rarefied stratum where the air is thin with paranoia. The closer you orbit the sun, the more it can burn. The experience of Choe Son-hui drives home the absurdity and danger that define the peak of North Korea's power structure for those outside the Kim family. On the one hand, it is absurd that someone of Choe's talent and dedication can never truly be at the top simply due to her last name. On the other hand, it is dangerous, lethally so, to climb as high as she has, because the fall from those heights is a long, long way down. Every day, as a non-Kim elite, you must perform a balancing act of extreme loyalty and constant vigilance. You wake up and recommit to the fiction that your power is not really yours. It's merely an extension of the leader's benevolence. You go to bed knowing that if tomorrow the leader or his family decides your face no longer pleases them, you could be gone in a puff of gunpowder, or, if you're lucky, simply erased from the public's eyes. The guillotine hangs constantly above, held by the slender thread of Kim's favour. One cannot forget how Jang Song-taek, once the second most powerful man and Jong-un's own uncle, was dragged away and executed as a traitor, branded human scum, by the very media that had previously praised him. Power for non-Kims is provisional, conditional, and often terminal. It's dark comedy that a 60-year-old seasoned diplomat has to kowtow to a 12-year-old child simply because of her parentage. But it's also terrifying when you realize failing to kowtow could mean your death or exile. The whole system runs on this perverse logic. In the end, if you've done everything right, been born lucky, groomed yourself, served loyally, stayed modest, outlasted rivals and impressed the leader, you get a front row seat in the halls of power. But it's a bit like sitting on a throne made of porcelain. It looks grand, but it could shatter beneath you at any moment. The absurdity is that you've followed all these steps to climb a ladder that leans against a fundamentally unstable wall. The danger is that, at the top of that ladder, you're an easy target if the wind shifts. So what's the final takeaway of our practical guide? Perhaps it's this. In North Korea, the game is rigged, but you can still play and even excel as long as you never forget who owns the casino. You can rise to dizzying heights, but only as the moon to the Kim family's sun, reflecting their light. And if that sun ever decides to eclipse you, there's nothing you can do except hope to endure in the shadows until its glare passes. Good luck, if you ever really need this guide.